My name is Josh Megysey. I'm with the Nongame and Endangered Wildlife Program at New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. So I started back in 2014 doing piping plover and shorebird work, and then I got right into doing turtle work, which has always been my passion and continues to be. I grew up in New Hampshire and sort of like spent my youth hunting for rare turtles, not hunting literally, but looking for them and trying to figure out where they were in the state. And so I had some fun little discoveries when I was young, but it sort of inspired me to make a career out of it. So anyway, I'm going to be talking about eastern box turtles and wood turtles. So I work with Blanding's turtles as well, the state endangered species. I also work with spotted turtles. But these two have been the focus in the last year, 2 years, and eastern box turtles have been sort of an ongoing project that I'll talk about. So the non-game endangered wildlife program is basically in charge of 30 endangered species, 21 threatened species, and 62 special concern species, and the thousands of other species that are not hunted or fished for, so insects, mammals, birds, etc. And that little list there can be found on our website, so you can see the full list of listed species. We're kind of operate as sort of like a nonprofit. We get very little from the general fund in the state. We get most of our funding from federal grants, moose plate money, the conservation license plate money, and private donations. And so most of my research is done through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grants, competitive state wildlife grants. So New Hampshire has 7 species of native turtles. So as I mentioned, Blanding's turtles, eastern box turtle, spotted turtle, wood turtle, snapping turtle, painted turtle, and musk turtle. Now, 4 out of the 7 are listed of some sort. So 4 out of the 7 are not doing well, and a couple of them are doing very poorly, and I'm going to talk about that, in particular the eastern box turtle. These are the 2 non-native species that we have. These are released pets. The yellow-bellied slider and the red-bellied slider are both, some of them have been naturalized in the southern part of the state. They seem to be showing up in other parts of the state. It's unknown at this time whether they are reproducing successfully or if they're outcompeting any of our native species. But they're 2 to keep an eye out for, especially in the southern part of the state, and both rivers and ponds and wetlands. So eastern box turtle and wood turtle. Wood turtle, as many of you might know, are known as a stream turtle. So they do spend half of their time in the stream. That's where they overwinter. They hibernate underwater in the rivers and streams. The other half of their time during the active season is in the uplands. So they wander far and wide from the stream that they kind of hibernate in and they emerge from in the spring. Eastern box turtles, on the other hand, are completely terrestrial and very rarely go into the water. They do need water, but they don't go into the water, and they hibernate under the soil. So there's a difference there, but they probably are the most terrestrial species, these 2 individuals. So before I get into the details of the work that I do with box turtles and wood turtles, I want to get into the threats for all turtles in New Hampshire, but region-wide, because there's some things I want you to keep in mind as I'm kind of talking through the work that we do and the conservation actions. And also, even though we have 3 species that are not listed in the state, amphibians and reptiles globally are declining. And this meta-analysis was done in 2000, but it's far worse now. And the main reasons are habitat loss. But there's other threats as well. So road mortality is a big issue for turtles in New Hampshire or any developed part of the country. So nobody consulted with Mr. Box Turtle when they built a road separating her overwintering forest with her nesting grounds. And so turtles have very, very high site fidelity. So they find a nesting site when they first become reproductive, usually 13 or 14 years old. They continue to go back to those nesting grounds over and over and over again, year after year, and it's hard to get them to change their patterns. And they'll continue to do that until they're 80 or 90 years old in the box turtle case. So turtles, so their body plan basically came about 220 million years ago. Modified ribs and vertebra turned into a shell, and that was one of the early transition fossils that they found, showing those rib bones sort of starting to widen and form a shell, and then their toothless, sort of beaked jaws also evolved. Not much has changed since then, and again, their anatomy is, you know, the shell is part of their body, so their shell is their vertebra, it is their spine, and it is their rib cage, and other bones as well. So when that shell gets damaged, it can sever their spine, it can, you know, damage other organs inside as well. And so this adaptation was able to sort of keep them from being predated by a whole suite of different predators over the years, but the one thing that shell can't do is protect them from cars. So anyway, so road mortality is a big issue for turtles, and every year, typically around May or June, the females come out of their wetlands or even their upland habitats, and they go to their nesting grounds and they become vulnerable to road mortality. Make sure that worked. So development is another big issue. So this development, commercial or residential, is just habitat loss. And so what we know about turtles is that, yes, they use their wetlands and their streams, but they also bounce around a lot. And that goes for even the most aquatic turtles like painted turtles and snapping turtles. You see them crossing the roads all the time. It means one of two things. Either they're going to their nesting grounds or they're going to a different wetland where they forage or meet up with mates. That wetland in the middle, you can stand in there and feel all warm and fuzzy that this wetland has been protected and, for water quality and whatever else. But what we know is that the turtles that live in there are the walking dead. They are just, the adults continue to age, reproduction is almost zero, and mortality is really, really high. And so eventually, especially the more rare turtles like Blanding's turtles that live in that system will become extirpated. That's Nashua, by the way. So the other thing is commercial and casual collection of turtles. And so as I'm talking about wood and box turtles today, I'm not going to be talking about specific locations because they're pretty sensitive. And so not that I don't trust all of you, but I don't really trust anybody. And they are sought after in the illegal pet trade for food and medicine as well in Asian markets. Some of these turtles can get $400 or $500 a piece, some of them up to $10,000 depending on their markings. The scope of this threat is not really known, especially here in New Hampshire, but we know it's happening and we're seeing more and more busts, and we're seeing people trying to get turtles smuggled into airports and trade ports, and they're putting them in their pants, and they're putting them in hamburger packages, and they're getting creative. But illegal wildlife trade is the 5th largest contraband trade, just behind narcotics. So it's a big deal, and the penalties are low in comparison to narcotics and arms and everything else. And so there's incentive. A lot of the turtles end up going to Asian markets where they've depleted a lot of their freshwater turtle species and their populations. So here's an example of an eastern box turtle with what looks like God on the side of it. And that turtle sold in an illegal market for $10,000 because it said God on it. Anyway, so that's the threat. And there are some other, markings that are more valuable than others, and females are more valuable than males, etc. And life history characteristics matter, so these individuals, even if it's that one god turtle, if she's removed from that population, it takes them 14 or 15 years to mature sexually, and if they don't get to that age, then there's no reproduction, there's no recruitment, and the populations can crash fairly quickly. Here's a good way to think about it. When you think about turtles not laying eggs, that's a snapping turtle, and this is in Ontario, but it's very similar. That snapping turtle didn't start laying eggs until it was 17 years old, and that's one clutch of eggs. As we know, those eggs sometimes hatch, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're dug up by predators, and then the hatchlings, when they do hatch, they have to make it to a wetland and overwinter, escape predators, etc. And I'll let you go through the whole all the different species, but when you compare that to white-tailed deer, in 17 years they've produced 912 young. So it's a big difference, and that's why recovery can be so slow. All right, so eastern box turtles. This one, I'm not going to be getting into a whole lot of like science-y stuff. I'm going to be talking about sort of like where we've come from, where we are now, and where we're headed. So when I first started in 2014, we knew that there were eastern box turtles here and there. There was records in the southern part of the state. They'd pop up here, we'd get a picture here, but maybe one or two a year. And we couldn't really get anywhere with that. That information is not really that useful. But it allowed us to sort of fill in this map. Okay, we got one here, one there, and so we kind of kept them listed as species of special concern because we had no data. We couldn't make any determination. Back in 2014, we finally got our hands on a female, and she was reported to us nesting in a power line in the southern part of the state, and we got out there right away, luckily, and we got a transmitter on her. This is a radiograph. She actually had eggs in her, and you can see 5 eggs in there. Those eggs were not viable, so not fertilized. And so we were thinking for a while, like, well, maybe she's just a released pet, and she's just walking around the landscape year after year, surviving the winter. So we didn't have a whole lot of hope. But we put a transmitter on her, and we followed her for 2 years with no other detections. We'd still get those couple reports here and there from other parts of the state, but still nothing to really sink our teeth into. By the way, this is the range of eastern box turtles. So up here in New Hampshire, they're very, very rare, and in the Northeast. But the further south you go and the further west, they're almost like backyard animals. They kind of crawl around the landscape. They're much more common. But so you can see down on the southeast part of the state, there's those 4 towns down there where we kept getting hits. We kept getting a report and a picture, and then that's where we finally found that female that I was talking about. So in 2 years, nothing, and then one day there was another one right near the female, and he was just hanging out with her. We put a transmitter on him. I think we found 2 more that year, and then since then, we've tagged and put transmitters on about 19 of them in 3 separate populations in one part of the state. And so in that particular area, it's very fragmented. The populations that are there are sort of isolated. Anyway, but the ones that we're interested in now are the ones on the western part of the state where we just can't get out to very often. And you can see that in Vermont, they also have a little population there that they're also trying to dig into and get more information about. And it sort of follows down the Connecticut River Valley. So these are the 3 known populations, and those are the ones we put transmitters on them. We use radio telemetry to track them around. We get 1 to 2 locations on them every week during the active season. We're working with Zoo New England, and they have a grant, a Disney Foundation grant, that's going to allow us to head start these turtles, get eggs captively rear the individuals, and in 2 years release them back into the known populations. So to head start these populations. So citizen science is a big thing for box turtles, but all turtles. If you see a turtle, we really need that report because we need to get that information, and we really need to get a transmitter on it so we can figure out where these other populations are, especially in this part of the state. So wood turtles, I'm getting low on time, so I'm going to kind of go through this kind of quick, but wood turtles are a stream turtle, much different distribution. They're statewide. The further north you go, the larger the populations are, but that's mainly because there's less people there. There's less roads and there's less development. They are also prized in the illegal pet trade, and they're very vulnerable in their stream habitats because they can sometimes, or many times, hibernate communally. So 40 and 50 individuals, 40 or 50 individuals can all kind of hibernate in the same area, and in the spring they emerge up into the riverbanks, and they're very vulnerable because so many of them can be collected at one time, at the right time of the year when the sun comes out. This is the kind of habitat, this is like the pristine habitat, this sinuous, sandy, gravelly streams, very picturesque and a great place to work. But they can be in other streams, just you know, the muckier the stream, the less oxygen is in that stream, the less likely you are to see wood turtles. We do put transmitters on these. A grant that we got 2 years ago has allowed us to track the populations that we know and put transmitters on them to figure out how they're using the landscape, because we know they wander and they go far, but we don't really know what areas of that landscape that they're using. These are where our priority areas are. So I won't go through the details of that, but this will expand as we get more information. This was a study that we did, and this is in this part of the state where we had 9 individuals, and these are just the different points of where they were. They all hibernated in that small stream there, and then they just went from there, and they radiated to different parts, and you can see the ones way out there in the woods to the west. That turtle spent the whole season in that area, and it crossed hayfields, it crossed roads and driveways, and was very, very vulnerable to mortality. And forestry operations if they're not done at the right time of the year. Here's another population, same thing in this part of the state. A lot of them just stay in the riparian zone and the floodplain, but many of them just go right up into the woods, and these are pine oak forests, and they spend almost the whole year there. And you can see that they're crossing roads and they're going to other streams and rivers. I'm not going to get into this anecdote. We can talk about it later, but we had one of them that disappeared, showed up 7 miles away. Luckily, somebody found it in their driveway, and we had put a pit tag in it. Anyway, we got it back to where it came from, and all is good. So in terms of conservation, my time is up, but I just want to say that land protection is key. So helping with land protection efforts and conservation easements, even if you're a private landowner, is kind of key. We have best management practices for forestry, agriculture, recreation. You can find that at northeastturtles.org. We also do nesting habitat creation in areas where, you know, to keep them from crossing roads and closer to their home wetlands. And again, report sightings, or you can contact NRCS through the USDA. I provide technical assistance to them for habitat creation, also land protection, and we do a whole bunch of work with them on private land because we can't do that otherwise as a state agency. You can find a lot of information on Northeast Turtles on their website as well. Sorry, that was quick, but thank you very much, and I'll take any questions. It could be. I think that as the GPS transmitters get cheaper and cheaper, we'll transition to that because there's a whole bunch of information we're missing in radio telemetry. Mainly, how are they crossing roads? Are they going through culverts or are they going over the road? That's important information. So hopefully we can transition fully to GPS.
Excuse me, I'm just going to interrupt and repeat your question so that the people can hear it on Zoom. So that was a question about MODIS. Next question. Yes?
How important is it to report every single sighting of turtle roadkill?
How important is it to report turtle mortality?
That's huge because there's a lot of money right now through the infrastructure bill to update crossings and improve wetland crossings and aquatic organism passage. So that information feeds into that process, and so we need that. And there's ARM funding and things like that that we use that data for. So even if it's a painted turtle or the more common species, please report those.
Yes.
Are you using conservation dogs to help sniff out any of these turtles?
Yeah, so I skipped over that. We have two turtle sniffing dogs right now that they're sort of in the process of being trained. But so far, so good. They're having pretty good success in Maine and some of the other states. And so I think, we started it this year. It was sort of the pilot. And so next year, I feel like we'll probably have some pretty good success. But yeah, good question. I skipped over that quickly.
Yes.
I know you mentioned threats like land, use and development, but whenever I see turtlenets being related, it just seems like that's a related factor as well. And are you doing anything in that space to protect nests?
So are addressing turtle predation.
So we're not right now. It's still ranked as a fairly low threat. It's something that's always there and always has been there. In areas where there's the human population's higher, there's more subsidized predators like raccoons. That's where you're going to see more predation. So it's a human-caused thing. And so in the future, we can use electric fencing and things like that. It just requires money, monitoring, upkeep, maintenance, all that stuff into the future because doing it 1 year isn't really going to do much. But the bigger threats are like, the road mortality of females, the complete loss of habitat, poaching, things like that when you just lose, large groups of individuals.
Yes.
What's your opinion about dam release, water from dam releases in your period of habitat for turtles?
What's your opinion about dam releases and water habitat protection?
So that can be a big issue for wood turtles. There's evidence of them, not in New Hampshire, but evidence in other states where large releases have entombed overwintering turtles in their underwater hibernacula. So big release, a lot of sediment, entombs them in the bank of a river or in a deep pool somewhere. And changing the hydrology can change dissolved oxygen levels and all kinds of other things, or wash them right away. So it's an issue. It's still not as big of an issue because they don't use some of the bigger rivers like the Connecticut River. They use the tributaries to it, and which that can also affect those, but just not as acutely.
If you do find a turtle and we want to let you know about it, so you would put a monitoring device on it, what's the best way to hold it until you can get it?
How can we help with the monitoring?
So if you were to find an eastern box turtle, you could put it into a cardboard box. If you're holding it for a short period of time, and then they don't really need food or water in there. You just have to keep them it needs to be a deep enough box that they can't climb out of it and get lost in your house or lost somewhere in your backyard where your dog can find it or something like that. So just secure it well, get in touch with us. We'll respond. For a box turtle, we'll respond very quickly.
Any other questions? All right. Josh, I imagine you'll be around for a while for people to come and talk with you. All right. Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay, thanks, everybody.